No one warns you that love, sometimes, is a no. Not the kiss, not the touch, not the birth. There are parents who spend entire nights imagining the face of the child who does not yet exist. Others spend nights awake asking the heavens for their child never to come. Not out of lack of love, but because the world is too full of pain. The first thing a baby does when born is cry. It is a sound that the whole world has learned to celebrate as a sign of life. But what if it is only the first protest against having been brought here? Julio Cabrera, an Argentine philosopher based in Brazil, wrote a phrase that titles his book, "Because I love you, you shall not be born." Love, according to his reading, is not the impulse to create. It is the courage to prevent the continuation of a tragedy. It is not a lack of hope. It is lucidity. We live in a time that calls a miracle what may be the most subtle and silent of all violences. Generating someone without asking their consent, throwing them into a world that can promise nothing more than loss, disease, fear, and effort. The myth of Cronus devouring his children is not about cruelty. It is about anticipating inevitable suffering. Cronus is time, and time consumes everything it generates. Cabrera simply asks, why deliver more bodies to time? The idea seems absurd until you stop and look around. Think of the wars that never cease, the hospital lines, the shelters where children await adoptions that will not arrive, the voices that are silenced because no one listened to them. Each of these scenes stems from the same origin. Someone, one day, believed that giving life was an unquestionably good act. But what if it is the opposite? What if the true act of kindness is to interrupt the chain of pain? This is not a philosophy for cowards. Cabrera does not preach suicide or surrender. He proposes something infinitely more difficult: to remain alive knowing that living is ethically problematic. To be the last link in a story, not out of desperation, but out of love. The "because I love you, you shall not be born" is the opposite of selfishness. It is the most extreme form of empathy, recognizing that existence is such a heavy burden that the greatest gesture of affection is not to hand it over to anyone else. And here begins the journey that few have the courage to make, that of looking at life without the varnish of the miracle, without the anesthetic of automatic hope. A journey to finally understand what it means to love someone to the point of not creating them, in Cabrera's view. In the favelas of Rio, a mother sits on the packed dirt floor with a newborn in her arms. She has no water, no real roof, no food for the week. But she says she is happy because God sent a little angel. This kind of phrase is repeated every day, in every corner of the world, a collective anesthesia. There is something deeply dysfunctional in a society where bringing someone into the world, even in the worst conditions, is still celebrated as something naturally good. Where life is seen as a value in itself, even when it is covered in suffering from the first minute. Julio Cabrera calls this ontological optimism, the deeply rooted belief that existing is better than not existing. It does not matter the circumstance. Existence would be, by definition, something positive. Western philosophy, almost entirely, starts from the principle that living is good. Questioning this is seen as a scandal, when it should be the starting point. Julio Cabrera writes, "But the scandal is not in the doubt, it is in the imposition. Life is not neutral. It is a project of constant deterioration. From birth, the body decays, the mind is disturbed, bonds are broken, and everything that is loved is condemned to loss. The only real certainty of existence is pain in the end. And yet, we keep repeating that life is a miracle, as if that were an argument. It is not, never was, never will be. It is a modern dogma, as religious as any other." This ontological optimism serves a purpose: to justify reproduction, guarantee the continuity of the system, and keep the machine turning. No one wants to look at the abyss that is the idea that perhaps we should never have started any of this. Modern medicine is full of efforts to prolong life, but there is no science concerned with evaluating whether it is really worth it. The unborn is never asked if they wish to come. This is because asking would already be admitting that being born is not a right. It is an imposition. Nietzsche said that he who has a why can face any how, but what if there was never a why? What if birth is just an arbitrary biological event, followed by a dragging of days, where the best we can hope for is not to suffer as much today as yesterday? Human life is structurally frustrating. It does not just contain sufferings, it is organized suffering, writes Cabrera. Ontological optimism is useful for those who are already here and need to survive. It lubricates the engine. But when it comes to deciding whether it is worth manufacturing another consciousness to carry that burden, that optimism becomes dangerous. It becomes propaganda. And propaganda is the opposite of ethics. There is no logical argument that supports that being born is always better than not being born. There is no way to prove this hypothesis. No unborn person can relate the experience of never having existed. But those who are born, sooner or later, relate the pain of being here. This is not a philosophy of despair. It is the beginning of a real responsibility. Not bringing someone into the world, in this context, is not surrender. It is a break against the machine of denial. It is the only honest way to break the cycle of impositions justified by dogmatic beliefs. Life is not a gift. It is a duty that was never chosen, and no duty imposed without choice can be called a blessing. Birth is the first crime we suffer, and the only one no one survives unscathed. The scene is simple, universal, inescapable. The body expelled, the air tearing virgin lungs, the inaugural scream. The world calls this life beginning, but philosophically, it is the opposite. It is the first rupture. The instant a being is launched into existence without consent, without context, and without escape. Freud, in Beyond the Pleasure Principle, described birth as the original trauma, the moment that inaugurates the tension between desire and reality, pleasure and pain, self and world. Cabrera goes further. For him, that trauma is not just psychological, but ethical. He writes, "The fundamental aggression is in birth. From there, everything the individual does will be the attempt to manage a pain they did not ask for." Traditional ethics, since Aristotle, presupposes that life is the field where good is realized. But Cabrera proposes inverting the axis. Life is the stage where evil has already begun, not as a result of choices, but as an ontological condition. Birth is not a neutrality, it is a forced beginning. There is no contract, no pact, no signature. And yet, all human morality is raised upon the fiction that living is a gift. How to sustain an ethic that ignores that the origin of every subject is an inevitable violation? Cabrera calls this ethics of origin, the need to recognize that human morality is built after an aggression. Every attempt to do good happens on the ground of a primordial injustice. The fact of having been brought without choice to a terrain of suffering, limitation, and loss. Classical philosophy fled from this finding. Kant tried to solve the moral problem with his idea of autonomy, the rational subject capable of choosing between good and evil. But Kantian autonomy is a mirage, because before any choice, there is birth, and there is no possible autonomy before existence. A being who did not choose to exist can never be totally free. All human freedom is relative, derived, contaminated by the initial imposition. Therefore, Cabrera speaks of a negative ethics, a morality founded not on promoting good, but on avoiding harm. It is not about making the world better, but about not repeating it, not perpetuating the gesture that generates the trauma. Medicine calls birth the beginning of life. Philosophy, on the other hand, should call it the event of total exposure, the delivery of a consciousness to a system that will inevitably wound it. Pain is structural, not accidental. Schopenhauer had already pointed this out in The World as Will and Representation. Life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. The phrase is brutal, but exact. It dismantles any discourse of automatic celebration of existence. Because if being born is being condemned to a cycle of lack and frustration, the only truly ethical gesture is not to bear life well, but to prevent it from repeating itself upon another being. Cabrera writes, Birth is the only morally irreversible act. Once done, there is no return, no possible correction. All ethics that comes after is palliative. Helping the poor, curing the sick, comforting the afflicted, all that is noble, but secondary. The first evil has already occurred. Birth is the absolute harm. Faced with this, the inevitable question is not how to live well, but is it legitimate to cause another life? And here, philosophy divides into courage and cowardice. Courage is recognizing the moral scandal of birth. Cowardice is calling it a miracle. The ethics of origin is implacable because it offers no escape. If life is structurally suffering, then the act of generating is, inevitably, an act of ethical violence, even if disguised as love. But it is here that lucidity reveals itself. It is not about condemning those who live, but about recognizing the price of existence, and only those who recognize it can love consciously, not as one who spreads, but as one who contains. Birth is the initial wound. The true love, which Cabrera speaks of, is the gesture that prevents that wound from reopening in another body. Every generation promises, "My children will have a better life," and every generation fails. The human being lives in this paradox, desires to transmit love, but only manages to transmit pain in another form, believes that by creating someone they are offering meaning, when in reality they are recreating the same void they try to escape. There is something tragic and profoundly human in it. We seek continuity as if it were transcendence. We want to be remembered, leave heirs, give life. But at the root, what drives this impulse is fear. Fear of disappearing, fear of oblivion, fear of not having been worthwhile. Julio Cabrera identifies in that impulse the center of the modern moral contradiction, parenthood as a form of disguised selfishness. Procreating is imposing on others the same burden that we did not have the courage to reject. Julio Cabrera writes, "The love that generates is not always generous. Sometimes it is possessive. It wants to leave a piece of itself in the world, a mirror, a symbolic continuity. But the love that prevents birth is the opposite of that. It is the love that renounces itself. The love that does not want an echo, does not want an heir, does not want a reflection. It is the love that dissolves so as not to repeat the violence of existing." Albert Camus, in The Myth of Sisyphus, said that there is no destiny that cannot be overcome by contempt. Cabrera takes this further. There are destinies that are overcome by interruption. If life is a cycle of repeated suffering, the only truly human gesture is the pause in the reproduction of that cycle. Cabrera's anti-natalism is not nihilism. It is not a hatred of life. It is the extreme attempt to love without hurting. Today, millions of people choose not to have children, not out of disinterest, but out of lucidity. The world is saturated, exhausted, overpopulated with interrupted stories, wounded childhoods, broken promises. And most interestingly, recent studies in psychology show that people without children report, on average, higher levels of subjective well-being when their motivations are ethical and conscious, not material. That is, renunciation can, in fact, be a form of peace. But there is something deeper here. The modern human being is exhausted not only economically, they are exhausted existentially. Work became survival, love became a market, technology became anesthesia. And within that scenario, the desire to bring a new life sounds less like hope and more like stubbornness. Cabrera writes, "The perpetuation of the species is the last dogma of a civilization without gods. It is a phrase that dismantles any biological or cultural justification. Because, after all, what does it mean to give life on a collapsing planet, where the air kills, time sickens, and love fragments between debts and screens? The ethical gesture of not generating is, paradoxically, the most human thing left. It is not surrender, it is conscious compassion. It is the only form of love that demands no retribution, no recognition, no gratitude. It is the love that, out of lucidity, abstains. In the Greek tragedy of Oedipus, the oracle says he will kill his father and marry his mother. Laius, his father, tries to avoid destiny, but by generating Oedipus, he already condemned him. The tragedy is not in the prophecy, it is in the birth. By bringing the child into the world, Laius creates the stage for his own ruin. Loving anti-natalism is the understanding of this on an ethical scale. Every birth contains within it the seed of future pain, of the child, of the parents, of the world, and the only way to break the tragic cycle is not to fight it, but not to restart it. Not generating is not the end of humanity. It is the beginning of honesty. It is admitting, without masks, that loving someone may mean sparing them the burden of existing. Human life is not a construction, it is a detour, an operation of containment. Ask anyone anywhere in the world what they do every day, and the answer, reduced to the essence, will always be the same. I avoid the worst. I avoid losing my job. I avoid getting sick. I avoid feeling lonely. I avoid disappointing. I avoid going crazy. Existence is managed like a minefield. It is not about conquering, but about surviving the next explosion. Julio Cabrera affirms that life is not a positive project. It is a negative project of resistance to evil. Human life is not oriented by the production of goods, but by the constant neutralization of the evils that structure it. This statement is not rhetoric. It is structural. From birth, we are thrown into a world where the body rots, the mind fails, and time disfigures us. Everything we do, consciously or unconsciously, is to try to postpone the collapse. There is no life plan, only containment plans. Schopenhauer was brutal in saying that happiness is only the momentary interruption of pain. He understood that the core of existence is not made of fullness, but of lack, wanting, feeling absence, trying to fill what escapes. And when we succeed, what comes next? Boredom. Cabrera, without needing to resort to systematic pessimism, takes this intuition to an ethical level. If human life is fundamentally defensive, if living is, above all, containing evils, then bringing it into the world is to enroll another being in that logic of forced containment. This is the point where philosophy becomes unbearable for many. It does not offer comfort, it offers clarity. And clarity here is implacable. No one can live without suffering, and no one can live without fighting to suffer less. This struggle is what we call life. It is not about seeing the negative side of things. It is about exposing the real mechanism of experience. Health is the absence of disease, not a conquest, but a suspension. Peace is the absence of conflict, not a presence, but a pause. Love is often the absence of abandonment. Everything we value is the shadow of what we fear. Life is lived deep down, by contrast with what we avoid, and this, when recognized with honesty, dismantles any idea that living is an obvious good. The negative project that Cabrera speaks of is not pessimism. It is a diagnosis. It is understanding that life, far from being a trajectory of fullness, is a sequence of attempts to reduce inevitable damage. Every choice we make, in working, sleeping, relating, carries that hidden logic. We do not seek good, we seek relief. And relief, by definition, presupposes pain as the original state. Against this diagnosis, the natalist discourse offers distractions: love, legacy, fullness, meaning, but none of these concepts survive direct contact with concrete life. Love demands sacrifice, legacy is lost, fullness is fleeting, and meaning is something we spend our lives trying to create from scratch, every day, like someone building a shelter in flooded terrain. Cabrera does not offer a solution. He offers a limit, not repeating the imposition. If living is carrying a negative project that we never chose, then the only ethically full gesture is to prevent another from being placed in that same battlefield. This does not mean that those who are alive should stop, but that no one should be summoned for that task without a choice. Life as a negative project is the great ethical revelation of anti-natalism. Loving is not bringing someone to live as well. Loving is recognizing the burden of life and not passing it on. Living is no excuse to manufacture more life. That is the line that separates loving antinatalism from nihilistic escape. Julio Cabrera never defended suicide or preached the abandonment of existence. His philosophy is, on the contrary, a call to extreme responsibility. Since we were launched without a choice, we do not have the right to launch others. This is where everything fits. Birth is an ethical trauma. Life is a negative project. True love can be a renunciation, and the belief that living is good by definition, ontological optimism, is a fiction that only holds because we are afraid of the void. But facing that void is not weakness, it is strength. Not having children is not renouncing life, it is assuming it. It is recognizing that the damage is already done and that we must not perpetuate it. It is becoming the endpoint of a chain that was never chosen. And that requires more courage than blindly repeating the ancestral gesture of reproduction. Because living, even lucidly, is already an unbearable task on many days. Continuing, knowing what is known, is a radical act. But continuing without contaminating the world with another consciousness exposed to pain, that is what Cabrera understands as full ethics. Living lucidly is being the last in line, not out of sadness, but out of compassion. And if it seems little, it is because we were taught to measure value by the number of heirs and not by the honesty of our limits. Being the last is an ethical gesture, not a biological one. It is an end that is offered as liberation. The pain ends with me. No serious philosophy can ignore this. Freedom, autonomy, dignity, all those concepts crumble when applied to the unborn, who have no way to say yes or no. The only way to radically respect that absence of choice is not to act. This is the last frontier of ethics, knowing when to stop. Stopping not out of desperation, but out of lucidity. Not out of contempt for life, but out of respect for pain. Not out of emptiness, but out of love. Life is, as Simone Weil said, an expiation without fault. But repeating the expiation is becoming an accomplice. And what Cabrera proposes is the ethical gesture of rejecting that complicity. Humanity will be saved not when it finds a meaning, but when it stops imposing suffering. And then, the video ends, not with hope, but with a silent pact. If you understood, you know. And if you know, you do not repeat. If you have made it this far, it is because something inside you rejects easy answers. And that is exactly why I now invite you to become a channel member. Becoming a member is not just supporting. It is being part of a rare, lucid, brave community that faces existence without masks. You strengthen this project, receive exclusive content and interactions, and help keep alive a philosophy that has no place on the surface. And for those who are already members, my most sincere recognition. You not only support this channel, you support the possibility of a thought that dares to tell the truth. Thank you. Now, an invitation that is not for everyone. If you feel that something in the world is out of place, this channel will not comfort you. It will transform you. If you prefer to support in a one-time way, the Super Thanks feature is active. It is simple, direct, and every contribution makes a real difference. But the truth is, just by watching this far, you have already supported. Commenting, sharing, reflecting together, all of that matters. Because this channel is not a monologue. It is a philosophical refuge for those who still think. And if you think, feel, and question, you are already part of it. Let us continue together. Thank you for always being here.